as long as you keep going forward and experimenting and trying things, you'll find somewhere. But it was sometimes hard to look at other people who had a very simple, clear direction, and you go, "Oh, I wish I wanted to be a doctor. Then it would be so easy."
Sushi Go Party, Gizmos, and 70 other popular board games all come from today's speaker. His game have become the must-have board games during this difficult year. It's my pleasure to have Phil Walker Harding with us on another episode of the Ask the Professional series. We are here to talk about Phil's successful career as a board game designer and as a minister of a church. Hi, Phil.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
First thing first, maki, sashimi, or what is your favorite sushi?
Well, probably I'd have to say my absolute favorite, although I like lots of types, is just a nice big plate of salmon sashimi.
Okay, and why did you choose sushi for Sushi Go?
Well, partly just because I love sushi, and I think I was eating it a lot at that time. There was a couple of great restaurants near us that we were visiting, and it was just in my mind. But also, it just suited the mechanism of the game where you're passing cards around the table. It made me think of a sushi train going round and round. So yeah, that's why I went with it.
Oh, that's interesting. And in terms of your career as a board game designer, how did you get into this industry?
Well, it was a very slow and gradual thing. So it began in 2000 and around 2005 or six. I just started dabbling in my own game designs just as a silly little hobby on the side. And in 2007, I decided to self-publish my first game. And this was a very sort of handmade affair. I only made about 100 copies. It was all locally printed, and I just assembled it myself. And so it was a very kind of humble beginning. I just sort of wanted to get my game out there. And I sold it online and at some little local conventions. And I did that a couple of times with a few games and just slowly built up a little bit of momentum that way. And one of my designs, a larger publisher came across, and they said they wanted to sign it to their publishing house. And so that was like my first step into the professional world. But that was a very small thing. And things just slowly moved from there. So I self-published for a while. And then when my designs started to get enough momentum on their own, I decided to just be a designer. But it was all a very slow process over kind of, 12, 13 years now.
And I think you mentioned some pivotal moments in your journey as well. And I'm quite curious, what did you study at uni?
Well, I went to uni to study film. So I wanted to be a movie director, which, is a very different thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of wanted to be through high school. So that's what I went and studied at uni. But then quite soon, once I got into my film degree, I sort of realized, this isn't really a career pathway in the sense that I could see like a creative job on the horizon right after uni. I knew it would be quite a long time before I'd work into a really fulfilling creative position. So I just kind of thought, maybe I can just leave film as a hobby. And so that was it. I just kind of left it on the side a little bit. And I still love movies, and I used to dabble in making short films and stuff. But yeah, everything kind of changed. So
story behind the scene. And I'm really curious that will you share any other new game with us today?
Well, I have a few things coming out, but one thing just came out this last week. It's called Cloud City. I happen to have a copy right here. So this is my latest game, and it's about building a futuristic city in the clouds, and it kind of has 3D buildings and stuff in it. So that was really fun to work on. So that's brand new. That's my newest thing. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I will definitely have a try. Thank you. Well, do you think degree really matter in terms of your career pursuit?
Well, it didn't for me. So yeah, there's not that much crossover between what I do now and what I studied. I mean, I did study something creative, and it did teach me quite a lot about just,
Hmm.
the creative process and having discipline in your creativity. So it taught me some general things about how to be a creative person. But yeah, for me, after university, I kind of tried lots of different things. I had lots of different jobs, I tried lots of different hobbies. And so, yeah, I guess I definitely didn't feel that I had to keep going down that one pathway.
I could see it's kind of exploring process as well after the graduation. And in terms of some career advice, what are some important skills, attributes, or experience that is required of a professional board game designer?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, for most game designers in tabletop gaming are freelance, which means you pretty much work on your own, and then you pitch your ideas to publishing companies, and they hopefully will pick them up. But most of the work you do is on your own. Um, you can collaborate with other designers, but still, it's often working from home, and it's often very much just about self motivation. So I think that that's a very important thing. You have to be committed to making a design better and being willing to make a lot of mistakes and try again and again and test and test and test. So there's lots of perseverance, I would say, and self motivation. Um, and yeah, working from home is something that a lot of people find hard. I find it hard. Um, and being willing to, I just be open to finding inspiration for your designs in lots of different places as well. So it's kind of a hard. It's not like a usual career in lots of ways. So it's quite outside the box.
Okay. And is board game design quite a technical area of work?
It's interesting because it definitely has a technical side. So there's game theory and probability and a lot of mathematics behind a lot of games. So
Mm-mm.
there's definitely a technical element to how you have to think about them. But there's also a very creative element. So it's kind of like art and science together in a way, because you need to make a creative, enjoyable experience for the players. But then there's often some mathematical kind of thinking that goes behind the scenes. So it's a bit of a mix of both worlds.
That's interesting. And the next two questions actually come from our audience. The first is, what is a game mechanic?
What is a game mechanic?
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess that's probably a just a way of explaining the different pieces that make up a design. So, like an element of game design, often people call a mechanic, which is interesting. So, for example, in Sushi Go, uh, it's a card game where you each turn you choose a card from your hand, and then you pass your hand around the table. And a lot of people say, well, that's the central mechanic that drives the game, that kind of drafting. So that's one way of like breaking down how a game design fits together. Hmm.
Hmm. And the next kind of follow-up question, actually, what is your favorite mechanic in a board game?
What is my favorite? Well, there's a really cool game I like called Race for the Galaxy, which is a card game. And in that game, you're building kind of a little space empire out of cards.
Hmm.
But the cool thing about it is when you have to pay for something in the game, you don't have money. You have to pay with the same cards that you're building. So each card is both something to build and it's also money at the same time. So these cards have like multiple different uses. And that's really clever because it makes you think about every card you're going to play in lots of different ways. And so it's not hard to understand that, but it opens up all this extra space to strategize. So yeah, that'd be one of my favorites. Yeah.
Beautiful. And can you tell me what the process is from design to distribution of a board game?
From design to distribution.
Uh,
Well, I mean, it's a huge process with lots of different people involved. But from my perspective, it's kind of like for me, I often start a design just with brainstorming. So I have a notebook that I carry around, and when I first get an idea, I'll just brainstorm, write out ideas, draw pictures of how it might look. That's kind of the very first step for me. Then I make a very simple, basic prototype just out of paper, just to make sure it works, and I'll test it myself just to like see if it even could work. And then if it does, I'll make a nicer version, a nicer prototype, and I'll test it with other people and slowly refine it and make it better and better. And that's sort of how the design process goes on. And then for me, because I work with other publishers, I will pitch my design. So I'll set up a meeting and I'll bring the prototype along and I'll show them how it works. And I'll try and get them excited. And if they like the idea, they'll take it and they'll test it for a while. And then we'll sign a contract if they like it. And then publishing kind of is handed over to them. So they will do all the graphic design and artwork. They'll do the game manufacturing. And then once it's manufactured, they'll ship it to a distributor, which is essentially a massive warehouse somewhere. And then that distributor will send it out to game shops. And then you can go buy it. That's usually how it works. Something like that.
That's a long process, I would say. And, nowadays we are all talking about networking, these things. Do you think networking is important in your area?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So the board game scene, there's like big conventions that happen every year all around the world in different places. And they're kind of the heart of, I guess, the hobby in terms of networking. So living in Australia, I'm a bit outside of the industry in a lot of ways, but I try and get to an international convention every year. And firstly, just to meet publishers and show them my designs, but also just to meet other designers, to meet publishers, to meet other people in the industry, to get to know them, to maybe build up a relationship that might turn into something more in the future. Yeah, it's definitely important. And like any industry, the relationships you have are really valuable. So once you get to know a publisher well, they might want to keep working with you. Or if you meet a designer and you just hit it off as friends first, maybe that will turn into a working relationship as well. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
That's so true. Building the connection with people. And I assume creativity is a really important skills in game design. How did you cultivate this skill and even, continue to sharpen this part?
Yeah, I mean, creativity is a hard thing to pin down, It's not a skill in the same way as, being able to work with wood or something is a skill you can practice and get better at in that same way. But you can definitely try and like spark your own creativity. So for me, that often means playing lots of new games. Because every time I play a new game, especially one which is quite popular or lots of people are playing, it often makes me think about game design from a different angle, or it shows me something new that someone else has been considering. And that often just sparks different ideas for me. So I think getting outside your own head and trying to have different experiences in kind of the field you're working in can really help keep you creative and thinking creatively. And also just having other hobbies on the side. So not only thinking about game design 24/7, but doing other things as well.
Oh, that's really helpful. And what motivates you to continue to make board games?
I think what's exciting about board games to me is the way they bring people together. So around a table, or even during COVID, people have been going online and playing games together with their friends over Zoom and things, which is really cool. So that's really what inspires me to keep making games, because they have that amazing ability. And so to think that there are people all around the world playing my games and it's bringing them together, even if they're of different ages or different backgrounds, that's really cool. So that's something that I find really motivating.
Yeah, it's kind of magic power. Like you make people who didn't know each other before, and then because of game, they become friends.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I've seen it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew you are a minister as well, and are minister better ball game designers?
Well, there aren't that many of them that I can think of who do both, so maybe no. Um, well, no, it is a strange combination of things, I guess. I don't know of anyone else who's in exactly the same position as me, so maybe not. Yeah, a lot of board game designers come out of like engineering or programming or the more technical side of things. So yeah, I don't know if maybe there's no real combination there. I'm just really strange.
Interesting, interesting. And why did you decide to become a minister?
That's a great question because it's not something I wanted to do really. So, I mean, I grew up in the church and have always had a faith and loved just being a part of a church and a Christian community. That was always a big part of my life. But I never really wanted to be, the person running the show up the front. That wasn't something that really interested me. But I guess lots of things changed. Like I did end up going to Bible college to study more about the Bible and theology because that was a fascinating topic to me, and I thought maybe I'll be a Bible teacher or an academic in that world. But that didn't kind of happen either. And anyway, I was going to the current church I go to here, and they just really needed someone. They didn't have anyone their old minister had moved on, and they didn't really have anyone else, and so I was like, oh, I could do that, and I just kind of filled in because they needed someone, and that's how it happened out of kind of necessity. But it turns out it's a really rewarding and exciting thing to do. So it's kind of like realizing, oh, maybe this is for me, but it's not something I quite expected I would be doing.
Interesting. And is there any specific attribute is required to become a minister?
Well, yeah, that's a great question too. Um, I guess different denominations and church organizations have their own, official requirements. So a lot of them require you to have studied theology somewhere, and they might have other requirements as well. But I would say the biggest requirement is you have to really want to love people. Like you have to be someone who wants to be compassionate and serve others, and help them in their relationship with God and their relationships with each other. Someone who has a real heart for that. If you're just in it for status or money or seeing it as a job, I think that's not a good match because that's not what it's really about at all. It's much more about serving people and loving people. So I'm not saying I'm the best in the world at that, but I think that's what you've got to want to at least try to achieve. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And regarding your two roles, what does your day-to-day look like as a minister and a board game designer?
Yeah, well, sometimes it gets a bit complicated. So I work from home a lot during the week. So Sunday I'm mostly actually doing church and getting ready for church. And then sort of Monday to Friday is a bit of a mush, like a combination of the two. So I try and have at least a couple of days a week where I just think about game design because that can be helpful if you get on a roll. But I think the reality of a freelance job and then a sort of part-time job is they'll bleed over into each other quite a lot. So you have to kind of be pretty good at time management when you have two or three little jobs because they can easily kind of step on each other's toes a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And your two roles seems quite different. Does your work as a board game designer affect your work as a minister?
They are very different, and often they feel like two different worlds. But certainly, like any part of your life, when one part's going well, it affects your mood and it affects how you just feel. It gives you energy, and when
Mm.
it's going badly, you kind of lose energy. So yeah, so if things are really hard at church or if things are really hard with game design, I just find it often does sort of take the wind out of your sails in the other area. Um, but most of the time, when things are just going okay or going normal, usually they're quite separate. But it is interesting. I do notice how, even though they're very different things, the way they affect me does sometimes come into play a bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And now let's go back to your career as a board game designer. We talk about mentorship a lot nowadays. Who do you go to for advice for for board game design?
Yeah. Well, when I first started, no one, because I didn't know anyone else who was doing it or taking it seriously. Really,
Mm.
there are more designers in Australia now, but when I first started, I didn't really even know anyone else. Um, there were lots of gamers, but not many designers. So when I first started, I didn't really have anyone, and that was tough because I kind of had to figure out a lot of things on my own. Um, Certainly, the internet was helpful in the sense that I could uh, connect with the hobby in other countries a little bit online. But in recent years, particularly by going to conventions, I've kind of sought out um, trying to get to know some other designers, particularly who are more experienced than me.
Mm.
For that reason, just people to ask questions, people to bounce things off, to talk about some of the details of the industry, contracts, and working relationships, and things that you just really need someone who's been around longer to give you advice on. So that's something I've sought out a bit, but it didn't kind of happen naturally. I kind of had to try and really look for that. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think it is or could be useful for people just starting out in either career, like for having the mentorship?
Sorry, what's the question again?
Oh, sorry. Like for having a mentorship, do
Oh,
you
yeah.
do you think it is or could be useful for people who just start off?
Oh, yeah. I wish I had that. I wish I had that when I was starting out. Someone to show me the ropes and get me started. I think that would be a great thing. As a matter of fact, even in board game design now, there are a couple of avenues where there are more experienced designers mentoring
Mm.
young designers, which is really good. Yeah.
Mm. And I guess mentorship is like the thing help you find a better version, and then you can find someone who give you advice, guidance along the way.
Mm.
And it's kind of the last question. If you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Well, a lot of things, but in terms of career stuff, anyway, I guess I would say, um, I think at that age, I didn't know what, I didn't have a very firm idea of what I wanted to be career wise down the track. I had a lot of interests and a lot of passions, but I didn't really see how they would turn into a job or where they would take me. I think what I would say is, I would kind of say that's okay. Like, don't stress too much about it. Just keep pursuing your interests, keep exploring new areas, keep trying to get better at the things you do. Because as long as you keep moving forward, I think things have a path will open up and you'll find a way forward. And I think there were times when not having a clear career path was quite stressful.
Mm.
So I think going back, I'd say, oh, don't worry about it. Just as long as you keep going forward and experimenting and trying things, you'll find somewhere. But it was sometimes hard to look at other people who had a very simple, clear direction, and you go, oh, I wish I wanted to be a doctor. Then it would be so easy.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah.
yeah. And I guess like exploring the process of exploring or getting to know more about yourself and the world requires patience as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it took until, it took, as I said, it took years before even the little hobby of game design became something bigger. So
Mm.
definitely patience has been a big part of my journey, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And actually, here comes our last audience question. Is there another Sushi Go style game in the works that you can talk about?
Well, nothing sort of official has been planned for another Sushi Go game, but I'm always working on new ideas for cards for Sushi Go Party. New bits of sushi that might become part of the game. So there might be another Sushi Go Party expansion or sequel or something down the road. So you never know.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. And here ends our conversation with Phil today. Me personally really learned a lot from you. And for the audience, if you have not played any of Phil's game, I would highly recommend to play it. And there will be details in the description. Thanks again, Phil. And yeah. Thanks for the ones who are watching our video. Remember to join our Facebook group for more insights from the professional. Bye.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're passionate, then the hard work doesn't feel as bad. Like it's still hard, but you're more willing to keep trying. So if you combine Sushi Go and Sushi Go Party, it's over 1 million.
Oh, you must be proud of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's yeah. I mean, a lot of it is how well the publisher Game Right they marketed it very well. So in America, especially, it's in a lot of department stores and stuff. So that's a huge part of it. Yeah, a lot of people. The most common response I get from people when they hear I design games is, "Oh, I didn't know that was a thing." Like people just don't even think there's a designer working behind the scenes. It's almost just like a toy company just magics them into existence. I think like it helps to have relatively regular releases in the sense that people do follow your work a little bit, like an author. So if you do have games coming out each year, it is good to keep your name out there. So that's definitely a thing. Um, but for me, it's like I'd be doing it even if it wasn't making any money. Like it's just something I love doing. So and when I was just doing it as a hobby, it still was a lot of my time. So it's just, yeah, it's just like my creative outlet, really. Um, so, but I'm thankfully in a position now where like, I don't have huge pressure because a few of my games sell relatively regularly. So I can kind of not freak out if I don't have something new coming out. But I'm always working on stuff. So it's kind of a constant flow.